Willkommen to Lanaken. Here we are, ready for top 4. We are nearly at the end of our first MSS here. Of course, we've got another one coming up tomorrow. So if you're loving what you're seeing, don't you worry, because we got more cooking up where that came from. Another batch of cookies in the oven. Speaking of cookies, well, these 2 sweeties on stream.
That's the cookie jar. That's a cookie jar that I want to dip my hand into.
Well, I just called us the cookies, Ben, so now that's weird, isn't it? Now it's just a little bit self-serving. Anyway, I'm Charlie Merriman, merry by name, merry by nature, and I'm joined on the desk by Ben Kiriakou. Still working on that pun for your surname, Kyrie, that's like a bow. That's
that's nice.
To do Kyrie before Kiriakou, or Cuckoo Kiriakou. He's a bit crazy.
Yeah, that's not wrong. That's not wrong. I'll lean into that.
We're gonna let's run with that. Cool. Let's see how that develops over the weekend. We've still got Beware here, still welcoming us to the stream. Thanks, Beware. And we've got our trainers. This is our only trainer who we haven't yet featured yet that remains in top 8. Joshua van Sandijk. And another Gallade on stream. If you were watching our previous top 8 match, you saw just how potent the Gallade was. Let's see if Joshua's own is in this matchup. And this is a more classic sort of trick room combination. You've got the Syrian Lilligant there as well to provide those fast sleep powders. Facing off against Christophe's team, the 3rd time we're seeing it today with that Blood Moon Ursaluna.
Not the only fighting type move, the Pokemon that's going to be able to make a real impact in this matchup, I'm sure, with After You support. It really does add a different dimension to these Trick Room-centric teams where you can either have this late-game clean-up Pokemon, Solar Blade, and close combats, and all of those really powerful, good moves that it gets access to. But in the early game, After Yous and Sleep Powders, and just looking down the team leads, this is exactly the 4 moves that this Pokemon is running. Solar Blade, Close Combat, Sleep Powder, and After You, of course, supported by the Focus Sash, supported by the fact that it's got a Terra Ghost up its sleeve as well to avoid any fake outs. No Farigiraf needed for this Hisuian Lilligant to be able to act in the sunlight. And of course, Christophe, we've seen previously on this broadcast, doesn't have any weather control options whatsoever. Whether or not Joshua will decide to opt to bring this Hisuian Lilligant, it's still up for question, but if it does come, it's certainly going to be doing a lot of fun stuff.
Yeah, it's worth pointing out as well that the Urshifu on either side of the field are differing ones. For Joshua, it's the single strike, and for Christophe, it will be the rapid strike style. And a choice scarf, no less, on Christophe's side of the field. So Trick Room certainly not something he wants to go up against, but that is indeed what Joshua is running here. Now, over on Christophe's side, I'm trying to see if we've got any safety goggles in play. Yes, the Ursaluna, of course, has those safety goggles rather than the Life Orb. So that could be huge if it's a Hisuian Lilligant lead coming out. But it's no Ursaluna. It will be the Gallade and the Indeedee for Joshua, and the Rapid Strike style Urshifu and Ogerpon Wellspring for Christophe.
I feel like we've just seen this
exactly.
lead combination, coming out from Yost, but Joshua using it to great effect, I'm sure, as well, and putting lots of pressure onto Christophe's side of the field. We know that a Psycho Cut will do a lot of damage, if not KO, both Ogerpon and Urshifu. And with the protection that the Indeedee affords, it is carrying a safety goggles rather than a Rocky Helmet, so Christophe doesn't have to worry so much about the recoil damage from a Surging Strikes, but that's still going to be a little bit of damage that it's going to have to worry about from the Gallade that's definitely going to get an attack off this turn.
Really nice going for Ice Spinner to remove the terrain, so the Psychic type moves won't be hitting quite as hard. Indeedee is going to be hanging on in the face of the Ivy card of Trick Room going up now, so the speed advantage well and truly on the slower end. Perhaps a little signpost for the Pokemon that Joshua has lurking in the back there. Now, Christophe, unable to deny the Trick Room, but the Pokemon over on his side of the field can benefit in that environment as well, so let's see how Christophe is able to adapt.
Ice Spinner looking good to take away the psychic terrain from the field, but not looking so good when you want to be putting pressure on. You don't want to let your opponent get a Pokemon in for free and kind of get that Trick Room momentum really going. And I think that's the difficult decision that you have to make in Christophe's shoes here as to how you want to approach this Trick Room matchup, because indeed he didn't get knocked out. It can just switch out as it is here and reset the terrain a little bit later on.
Exactly, switching back in would reset that terrain immediately. There comes the Sacred Sword. Urshifu taking a good deal of health there. Of course, the Rapid Strikes are not taking super effective damage. Gallade brought down low. Ice Spinner, now that has been locked into the Urshifu. That is good for breaking the Urshifu's Focus Sash, though, over on Joshua's side of the field. So still may well prove to go a long way. And of course, we're still in Trick Room, so this Gallade is going to be going first.
And potentially this Urshifu is going to be trained to be a little bit slower and a little bit bulkier, and may in fact move as well in before the Ogerpon gets to act. We won't see that interaction this turn, as it is switching out in favor of the Incineroar, but we're seeing how good that clear amulet item is.
Yeah, it was so huge in our previous match that we featured as well. That Sacred Sword going to be enough to take out the Urshifu. Once again, Gallade seems to be reigning superior over the metagame. Close combat into Incineroar. That's enough for the one-hit knockout. Joshua really benefiting from the twisted dimensions that Trick Room is offering.
Really clever play there coming out from Joshua. It's really easy when you've got an Urshifu, especially boosted by a choice band, to want to just click the fun button with Wicked Blow and just do those critical hit damage, especially in front of a Ogerpon as well, where you don't have to take the defense drops that come with the territory from close combat, but I think it's the really clever move to be able to use here. It does cover the switching and actually overall does a little bit more damage than a Wicked Blow because of its higher base power.
Right, and you know, with Incineroar on the field and what was the Urshifu, probably you are going for that close combat, and it hits the rest of the field on Christophe's side of the field for neutral damage right now as well. Although the Frigoraph has now just become the Terra Fairy type. So that's going to be resisting what the Urshifu can deal out. It does have the poison jab though, so it would have to switch out and come back in order to benefit from that. Look how much damage that is, even without the critical hit, thanks to the sharpness boost that Gallade gets from its ability. That's Gallade down. Urshifu, like you said, Ben, seems to be a bulkier variant, able to take that really quite well.
And the Farigiraf getting the throat spray because of that hyper voice. So getting a knockout and getting a boost at the same time, but this close combat comes out, does a lot of damage to the Ogerpon. Looks like without the Intimidate, it might not have even KO'd it before the Incineroar came in. That's something that we'll have to keep an eye on for a little bit later on, as Ivy Cudgel does dispatch of the Urshifu. But now that gives Joshua the opportunity to bring his last two Pokemon in, and there's no more Ice Spinner available for Christophe now that the Urshifu has been knocked out. And so, yeah, Indeedee and Hatterene looks like a really nice couple of Pokemon to be slotting in here.
Yeah, it certainly does. It's interesting that, you know, these are two Pokemon that sort of spell Trick Room with a capital T and R, but it was the Urshifu that was brought out by Joshua early on in the game, which is, of course, a faster Pokemon. So to be able to be left in these final couple of turns of Trick Room with the slower Pokemon, really well played by Joshua. You've got to know so well when it's going to be expiring and when you're going to be able to benefit from it.
Yeah, I mean, there's always this sort of plan of maybe going for a double Trick Room in this sort of scenario where you can effectively undo and redo the Trick Room, unlike Tailwind, where, you know, you just, the move just fails. Trick Room, you can extend it effectively, get another 4 turns of Trick Room. But here, I'd really like to see just the expanding force and the damage, because even after the Trick Room expires, you've still got the Follow Me support. Both of these Pokemon, Farigiraf and the Ogerpon, have taken a lot of damage, and so I think it's pretty much guaranteed at this point. But we do see the double protect, and yeah, it looks like this double Trick Room could have been a viable strategy, but happy to see the Follow Me.
Yeah, God, it would have been very cool if the double Trick Room had been gone for. Of course, this is not only stalling out the turns of the Trick Room, but also the Psychic Terrain, so that Expanding Force becomes a single target move. And right now, that is going to be the Twisted Dimensions returning to normal. So if this game ends up going Christophe's way, that could have been the turn that could have turned it round for Joshua, twisting those untwisting them and retwisting them.
As it stands, the Follow Me is on the board right now. The Ogerpon failing the second spiky shield, trying to get an opportunity for Farigiraf to knock out the Indeedee, so that next turn the Ogerpon gets an opportunity to go for an Ivy Cudgel. had the Sacred Sword, had the Spiky Shield been able to go 2 times in a row, it would have been able to give Christophe that window of opportunity to win the game. But as it stands, look at that damage. Expanding Force from the Terra Psychic Hatterene coming out into both targets and knocking them out cleanly.
Yeah. Terrain is so important in that endgame in order to get the spread damage that you're looking for. If you can only target one Pokemon, then you leave yourself much more vulnerable to be taken out later in a subsequent turn. And that means that Ice Spinner from the Urshifu is really, really important. It also means that stalling out the terrain for Christophe is really important, and keeping the Indeedee safe, switching it out and back in for that terrain is crucial for Joshua. So lots of terrain mind games going on, but also, of course, the Trick Room mind games and who's going to be setting it up, who's going to be benefiting from it more. I'm fascinated by Joshua's team and piloting it so well.
It seems like Joshua, I think, in answer to your question, really does have a lot of benefit to be run with it, especially when we don't see the Blood Moon Ursaluna. And that could be because Blood Moon Ursaluna is KO'd most of the time, at the very least, by a sharpness boosted Sacred Sword. Yeah, I was about to say Close Combat.
Yeah, that's it. It's just going to be me cursing for the rest of the stream. Okay, Ben, I unjinx you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very
it just
much.
helps
Thank
that
you.
Jinx is also the name of a Pokemon. So.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, I was getting mixed up with Close Combat because I just think of Close Combat as the only fighting type move in the game, but Sacred Sword, of course, is showing its value here. And I think, if the Blood Moon Ursaluna on Christophe's side of the field gets an opportunity to maybe launch a Blood Moon into that Gallade, it could mean that Christophe takes a little bit more advantage of the Trick Room. But then you look at the other Pokemon, the Torkoal, the Hatterene, and those are Pokemon that are slower than anything that Christophe has available in his arsenal. And so, if Joshua opts to bring the Hatterene like he did in game 1, or even just go for a slightly different mode, go for that Torkoal, then he's definitely going to take more advantage out of the Trick Room.
Well, Trick Room, is that going to be what we're heading towards here in this next game between these two fantastic trainers? Let's take a look over the shoulder. Here comes Gallade and Indeedee joining the field in the face of Farigiraf and Ogerpon. So once again, we've got 3 Pokemon on the field that can go for the Trick Room, but which one of them might do it, if any?
And the conversation that we were having about resetting the Trick Room, untwisting and retwisting the dimensions, well, that can happen outside of Trick Room as well, and it's usually used as a strategy to stop trainers getting up Trick Room when you really don't want them to, but you have to make the call because otherwise you're both not doing any damage and setting up the Trick Room for your opponent. That's quite a precarious situation to find yourself in, especially in the top 4 of a mid-season showdown or any event that you find yourself in. You really do want to be maximizing your chances, and sometimes you've got to make that call, but it's a really tough one too.
Well, which call have these trainers made? Let's get into our first turn of this top 4 match, game 2. So, Farigiraf going for the Fairy Terra type. That's going to be much better against the Urshifu that could be in the back for Joshua, apart from the fact that it does have access to that Poison Jab move. Follow me, coming out from Indeedee, taking the attention away from the Gallade, and what is going to be heading into the slot? It's going to be the Ivy Cudgel, dunking the Indeedee on the head. What is this Gallade going to be able to achieve? Yeah, Sacred Sword now resisted by that Fairy Terror on the Farigiraf, but of course,
you wouldn't know.
Boosted by the sharpness, exactly. Still doing fantastic damage. And the Farigiraf does set up Trick Room. Joshua might be thinking, well, thank you very much. You've just done that for me. Didn't need to expend any resources doing that. So heading into this turn, Gallade could be in a really good position.
Now, the question here I've got, you can go for a Psycho Cut into the Farigiraf. Now that it's a Fairy type, it doesn't resist those Psychic type moves that are boosted up by the Psychic Terrain. Of course, a Psycho Cut boosted up by the Sharpness as well. Maybe you can knock out the Farigiraf and stop the undoing of the Trick Room from the Farigiraf. But then if Joshua's reading into that, as is Christophe, maybe we see Follow Me so that the Trick Room can go off on Farigiraf, but then maybe the Indeedee could have gone for a Trick Room as well, and we could have seen the Trick Room reset and reset again.
Ben, you're tying yourself in knots, as the mind games would do in this particular match-up, as Urshifu joins the field. Spiky Shield's coming out, so it seems like Christophe now stalling out the Trick Room that they themselves set up. but getting a little bit of intel getting into the next turn. So Psycho Cut connecting down into the Frigoroth, where it would have done without the Protect. So now Urshifu ready to deal out poison jabs onto the field. And given that, as we saw in game one, it seems to be a slightly bulkier one, you know, that could well be something that Christophe has to think twice about. But the Gallade is going to be taking out the Frigoroth before it can get off a Dazzling Gleam or something that would be threatening down that Urshifu. So very well called by Joshua.
Yeah, I love that Psycho Cut into that target, just making sure that you're doing the damage. Let's call back to game one. Is it enough?
Yes.
It is enough to pick up the KO, this close combat. Well, the previously was intimidated, did about 60%. So yeah, maybe in one of those ranges there. All we know is that this close combat was enough to knock out the Ogerpon. Incineroar gets the opportunity to come in, but in this psychic terrain, it can't offer its teammate the fake out support it really wants to. Terror has already been used up by Farigiraf on Christophe's side of the field, and it looks like this Gallade is going to be able to just run away with this match yet again.
Gallade, the MVP here at the Belgian MSS, or our first one on the Saturday, would not have called that going into the weekend, but it's a Pokemon that, in the right positions with that clear amulet, is so threatening. So it's fantastic to see it coming out on top. And this is what experimenting later on in the metagame enables you to do. Look at that. Sacred Sword. Goodbye, Incineroar. Down. Well, I think Gallade would beg to differ. Close combat coming out into the Urshifu over on Christophe's side of the field. And you don't often see Trick Room games being played out so quickly. That's certainly what Joshua's offered. Real fast, dynamic player of this particular strategy.
Well, that's the thing. These sort of Trick Room games can sometimes be stalled out by the player that's not opting for the Trick Room, but just looks in this situation like Christophe doesn't have as many tools as maybe he would like to have in this situation. Does manage to get the Surging Strikes KO onto the Urshifu after its defense drops from those couple of close combats. There or thereabouts only just by the looks of things. But that just gives the Indeedee the opportunity to be switching in and can opt for the follow me. Gallade can take yet another KO in this match.
Yeah, well, it's not going to be given the luxury of doing that as the battle is forfeited and Joshua Van Sandijk stamps their ticket into the finals of the Lanaken MSS here this weekend. Cannot wait to see who will be meeting Joshua in the finals that will be able to feature on stream very shortly. Is it going to be a Gallade mirror match? It could be.
It certainly could be.
Because we saw Yost earlier on in the day progressing through the top four at least.
So what happens when one really sharp object meets another? That's not the same.
In reality, I think they could shatter each other's blades. I think in terms of Pokemon, they could both go down very quickly.
Or everything else.
Yeah.
Everything else could get knocked out very quickly.
Yeah, exactly.
By the looks of things, and by the damage that they're doing. And what I want to know is how much damage does a Helping Hand Psycho Cut in Psychic Terrain do to an Indeedee? Can it knock it out in one? That's the question I've got.
Do you mean a Sacred Sword? Or a Psycho Cut? Okay. Yeah, but
Sacred Sword would also probably do a little bit more damage, but
that was going to say.
I want to see the Psycho Cut.
Oh, I see. I'm not sure
see.
the trainers are going to give you the luxury of seeing that, Ben, to be honest, because I think they're probably going to go for the move that's going to be more effective.
Yeah, well, you know, that may be true.
We'll calc it for you.
Yeah,
how's that?
Yeah,
there
I would love
go.
that. Yeah,
Just keep him happy.
Make me
for Ben. Cuckoo Kiriakou throwing out one of his cuckooisms on stream now.
There we go.
So very well played. It's Christophe, a player who's been able to feature 3 times in total today on stream, which is brilliant. And I hope that Christophe is feeling incredibly proud of what they've achieved today here at the Lanaken MSS. But all eyes on Joshua right now. Didn't need to go with the Hisuian Elegant mode that particular game, but in the finals we'll have to see if that is something that Joshua is going to have to opt for.
Joshua done very well in this whole mid-season showdown, and I'm just double checking to make sure I'm accurate. Yeah, 4-1. So Alexander being our 5-0 undefeated player that we had on the stream a little bit earlier on today. Joshua that we didn't get to feature until now, until they made their way into the final. 4-1, almost undefeated going into the top 8. Now so far undefeated, of course, going into the finals. Christophe, of course, a very worthy opponent and a very worthy top 4 there. He's been a phenomenal player that we've had been able to watch play throughout this mid-season showdown, both from the early rounds to the end of Swiss. to this top 4 match. Commiserations for, of course, getting knocked out, but we're I think very excited to see who Joshua's opponent is going to be.
This is the thing, you just don't know what kind of team composition you're going to be coming up against, do you? Christophe, we saw earlier on in the stream, sailed through the rounds that they were playing, but coming up against that Gallade Trick Room team, maybe Christophe knew in advance, this is a tough matchup for my team, I'm going to try and do what I can, but take a bit of a deeper dive into the team sheets there. It feels like you've got to be bringing more more Pokemon that can benefit from Trick Room. I'm looking at this Raging Bolt, for example. Maybe it's got the Terra Fairy. You can go for that to at least neutralize damage from Sacred Sword, I guess, and then you have the Ice Spinner to remove the terrain to neutralize damage from Psycho Cut. You could set up with a Calm
Yeah,
Mind.
I can see it.
I'm thinking, I mean, I guess what I'm saying is I think there were potentially more tools that Christophe perhaps could have utilized in that game, but at the same time, Joshua was playing so well.
I think it depends on the training of the Ursaluna. That's really what I'm honing in on here, looking at Christophe's team sheet.
Sure.
Whether or not it was naturally faster or slower than the Ursaluna really makes a difference as to its viability. Do you let the Trick Room go up and then bring the Blood Moon Ursaluna in and maybe launch out a powerful move? Or do you have the capability to, say, in combination with the Raging Bolt, the Urshifus, just land it out onto the field right at the start, go for the Terra Normal, get some Hyper Voices going, get some Blood Moons going, try to punch a hole into what Joshua was using, and then be able to kind of have a little bit of a better end game against, well, that Gallade, really, and more to the point. But if you knock out the Indeedee, maybe you can find a way to kind of get at it a little bit earlier on.
Yeah, tricky, and mind games that had these trainers had the benefit of a championship Sunday, for example, to go away and reflect on for 24 hours. We could have seen a very different match play out, but as it was, Joshua piloting that Gallade team so very brilliant. Well, we know that next we'll be heading to our finals trainers, so you're not going to want to be going anywhere because we are nearly wrapping up our day here in Lanaken, and we've got the most thrilling match of them all yet to feature. Stick around.
you